We usually assume that the universe runs on rules. Laws of physics, laws of nature, the idea that every event that occurs has a sufficient reason, and that similar causes under similar conditions will always produce similar effects. Within this picture, discussing causation seems almost trivial. Stack 10 dominoes in a line, push the first one, and the rest will fall. Same setup equals same outcome. But hidden inside this intuition is a much stronger assumption, one that most theories of causation quietly rely on. The assumption that whenever a cause occurs, the effect must follow, not just here, but anywhere. This is what I call the universalist thesis, the idea that whenever C occurs under the right conditions, E follows. I want to argue that this assumption is mistaken, not because causation isn't real and we live in a floating rock with no rules, but because causation doesn't need to be universal to be accurate. This idea was first properly argued by David Hume, who defines the act of causation as a constant conjunction of whenever A, then B. But what if I told you that the idea of a law of causation is a logically problematic one to begin with? This idea is extremely intuitive. Philosophy by nature loves theoretical laws, logical statements which apply invariably across contexts. The entire study of metaphysics is so densely abstract that so many philosophers prefer tightly argued logical formulations, like the universalist thesis, to govern our opinions over more nuanced takes. Multiple different theories on causation all agreed on that one minor point. John Stuart Mill grounded causation in laws of invariable succession, and even philosophers who tried to reject the aforementioned universalist thesis ended up agreeing on it. Mackey seems to reject these causal laws because he denies that a cause is ever individually necessary or sufficient to cause an effect, treating it as one component that makes a difference within a larger configuration of different conditions that allow an effect to occur. Imagine causes as a spider web, and each of them make up the needed substance to cause an effect. But now, think of a house on fire. Imagine I blame that on a single spark. But that spark only matters because it completes one whole fire hazardous setup. Fuel on the house, oxygen in the air, and no rain that day, etc. Mackey's point is that whenever any such complete setup occurs, the effect must always follow. Now, why exactly is this thesis a problem? Now remember those dominoes I mentioned earlier? Good. Same surface, same spacing, same push. But one domino has a tiny crack inside it. Not visible from the outside, but enough to alter how it distributes weight as it falls. I push the first domino, the first falls, the second falls, and the third wobbles. Shakes a little bit, but it stays upright. Nothing about the laws of physics or anything dramatic has changed. What has changed is a locally relevant feature of the system. A minute structural difference is enough to break the expected causal pattern. Let's imagine a more traditionally philosophical example. Obese yellow mice. Seriously. There's a gene in mice called the agouti gene. Under the right circumstances, methylation patterns, maternal nutrition, and early embryonic signaling, this one cause can make the mice obese and yellow instead of their normal weight and brown. What's important here is that even given the same local context, the gene might not always activate. Same laws, same rules, same circumstances, but instead is locally determined. What the mother does directly translates to the mice ending up obese, yellow, and all the other things. Here I'm arguing that causation should be viewed locally. We must reject the intrinsic powers of some random cause and see structure as a major component in this equation. Our mistake as philosophers here is that the tendency to view things universally, not relationally, is much more appealing, which can be fine for metaphysics, but once we apply these theories to real-life circumstances, they should be in line with some of our scientific and empirical understanding of ideas in order to hold up to scrutiny. Imagine you buy a house. You get a light switch which should control two bulbs on the ceiling, one meant to light up each side of the kitchen. You turn it on, and only one of the bulbs turns on. The other one doesn't at all. The power of the light switch is still there, but the wiring must have got messed up because you cheaped out and got some random man off the street to do instead of getting a mechanic. It's that kind of idea. This idea is called local causation, recently argued by Tyler Brunet in 2021, who inspired me to make this video. Instead of asking whether C causes E generally, it asks whether C causes E in this location. Realistically, cause and effect vary massively across different locations and different contexts, so this version of metaphysics accounts more accurately for that. A good example of this can come from early modern physics. When Newton investigated the refraction of light using prisms in Cambridge, the point of the experiment was not merely that light behaved this way there in Cambridge, but that it revealed something law-like about light as such. The result was taken to support a claim of universality, that if the same experiment were performed elsewhere, in China, for example, the refraction of light would occur in the same way, provided the relevant conditions were reproduced. The location itself was treated as irrelevant. What mattered was that the same cause under the same conditions produced the same effect, effectively causing a breakthrough in physics. But notice what is actually doing the work here. Newton's experiment succeeds because of a very specific experimental structure is held fixed: the properties of prism and the nature of the light source, the isolation of interfering factors. We cannot guarantee that the result in Cambridge is the same as in China. The apparent universality of this causal relation is secured by the stability of the setup he had there, not by an intrinsic necessity carried by the cause itself. We cannot guarantee that if replicated exactly the same in China, the result would be the same. Once this is recognized, the example no longer supports the claim that causation is fundamentally universal. It supports the weaker and more accurate claim, and it's maybe slightly boring, but causal relations are stable across locations when the relevant conditions are reproduced. Under the universalist thesis, causal claims are viewed de re. In human terms, they are claims about the cause itself. To say that C causes E is to say something about what C inherently is, namely that it belongs to a type whose causal role is fixed wherever it occurs. If C appears and the effect does not follow, the assumption is that something relevant must have been left out. The generalization is preserved by adding further conditions until it becomes exceptionless. On this picture, causation requires type-level necessity. A genuine cause must carry its effect with it across all admissible contexts. Local causation, on the other hand, rejects that requirement. On a local account, causal claims are de locus. Claims not about the cause and abstraction, but about what happens at a place with a particular configuration. To say that C causes E is to say that at a specific location, within a specific structural setup, C participates in a process that produces E. The truth of this causal claim depends on how C is embedded, not an invariant power it possesses in isolation. The argument here, admittedly, is slightly practical. If we evaluate our evidence and understanding of science with a locally accounted version of causation instead of a universal one, it answers way more problems with variability and differences in physics, biology, meteorology, or anything you can think of. The point here is not some boring the universe is chaotic or that structure disappears once we abandon these universal laws. It's that structure does not take the form of exceptionless rules that apply everywhere without regard to context. Order does exist, but it is achieved locally through specific configurations and not imposed globally by necessity. So yes, the universe is bad at following rules, but that's not a defect. It just means our metaphysics should stop expecting reality to be cleaner than it actually is.